We've just got some breaking news in from Buckingham Palace, folks.
So, Prince William and Princess Anne have just done the one thing Camilla believed nobody inside the palace would ever dare to do. They have pushed her out of the royal family's inner circle, cut her off from discussions shaping the future of the crown, and made it clear that Charles's protection could no longer shield her. The announcement came only minutes ago, but the decision behind it had been building in silence for months. This was not a disagreement over seating plans, titles, or who stood where during a ceremony. It was a direct struggle over control. Camilla had been issuing instructions, moving aides towards sensitive positions, and inserting her office into decisions that did not belong to her. William noticed the pattern. Anne documented it, and when the letter reached them, neither was willing to pretend it was harmless. That letter changed the palace. It showed that Camilla's influence had moved beyond Charles's household and into areas connected to William's future reign. Staff appointments, residence access, ceremonial authority, private family meetings, even discussions tied to Queen Elizabeth's legacy. The language was polished, almost innocent, but the intention underneath it was impossible to miss. Someone was building a second center of power before the next king had taken the throne. William read the final page twice. Anne did not speak while he read it. She did not need to. A folder was open before her, packed with dates, copied messages, altered schedules, and instructions that had traveled through Camilla's office without William's approval. Anne had kept every detail, every name, every attempt to push one senior royal out while pulling one loyal advisor in. Camilla had mistaken Anne's silence for weakness. That was her first mistake. Anne had one more letter, and it carried William's name. Her second mistake was believing William would always choose peace with Charles over protecting his own future. For months, he had avoided an open clash. He knew what another crisis could do. He knew how quickly conflict could become public humiliation. But this was no longer about hurt feelings. It was about whether the Prince of Wales could prepare for kingship without someone else quietly redesigning the structure around him. Before Anne reveals the page that finally brought Camilla's influence crashing down, anyone who truly supports Prince William, Catherine, and Princess Anne should subscribe, like, and share this video right now. Because watching silently while refusing to support the channel only allows Camilla's side of the story to dominate. If viewers genuinely believe William and Catherine deserve to inherit a crown free from interference, this is the moment to prove it. Do not leave them standing alone. Hi viewers, whose side are you on? William and Anne or Camilla? Write William and Anne or Camilla in the comments. Do not sit quietly in the middle, because that same silence was exactly what allowed Camilla to believe she could never be challenged. The confrontation began behind closed doors at Buckingham Palace. Camilla arrived expecting another family discussion that Charles could soften before it became serious. Instead, William was already seated beside Anne. Officials were present. Legal advisors had been called. The folder was on the table. And for the first time, Camilla was not entering a room where her position beside the king guaranteed control. Anne asked one question. Why had Camilla's office attempted to overrule a family decision connected directly to Queen Elizabeth? Camilla did not apologize. She insisted that the monarchy could not be governed by decisions from the past. She argued that her position gave her the right to shape who remained influential. Then she dismissed Anne's objections as outdated resistance from someone unwilling to accept where power now belonged. The room fell silent. William had entered prepared to listen. That answer ended his patience. He told Camilla that marriage to the king did not give her authority over the future sovereign. Camilla pushed back. She suggested Anne had turned him against her, but Anne had not turned William against anyone. The documents had done that. Then Anne slid one letter across the table. It contained a proposal to reduce William's control over selected royal operations and transfer those responsibilities toward advisors approved through Camilla's circle. The changes were supposed to begin quietly, before objections could be raised. Before the palace understood what was happening, before William could stop it, that was the moment the argument became a threat. William placed the letter down, looked at Anne, and ordered an emergency family meeting. Every instruction linked to Camilla's office would be reviewed. Every appointment would be checked. Every private message would be traced. Camilla still believed Charles would save her. She had no idea that Anne possessed one more document, and the signature at the bottom was the one signature Charles could not ignore. Months before William and Anne appeared together, the first signs were easy to dismiss. A meeting moved without explanation. A private secretary replaced at short notice. A residence schedule altered without warning. Nothing looked large enough to trigger alarm. That was why it worked. Camilla's office never announced that it was taking control. It simply began behaving as though control had already been granted. The instructions arrived quietly. Some came through formal notes. Others traveled through trusted aides who sounded certain no one would challenge them. Staff were told that the Queen wanted certain names included in sensitive discussions. They were also told that several advisors were no longer needed in rooms where future ceremonies were being considered. At first, the changes seemed administrative. Then William noticed who was missing. Two officials who regularly briefed him on royal residences were suddenly excluded from a planning session. A senior advisor, connected to his future household, was told that the discussion concerned the present reign and therefore did not require the Prince of Wales. Another meeting involving ceremonial authority was moved to a time when William was committed elsewhere. One change could be coincidence. 3 changes formed a pattern. William did not react publicly. He understood how quickly a family dispute could become public. Charles was already carrying enough pressure, and William knew that a confrontation with Camilla would be treated as a personal attack rather than a constitutional concern. So he waited. He asked questions. He watched. Anne did something else. She wrote everything down. Dates, names, times, offices involved, instructions given, instructions denied. She kept copies of revised schedules and marked every occasion when Camilla's aides used Charles's name to strengthen a request that had not come from him directly. She did not complain. She did not warn anyone that a record was being built. That silence became Camilla's greatest source of confidence. Inside the palace, staff began to sense that 2 chains of command were forming. One ran through the king's established office. The other ran through Camilla's circle, where requests were framed as personal wishes but carried the weight of royal expectation. Few employees wanted to refuse the Queen and later discover that Charles supported her. Fear filled the gaps where clear authority should have been. One senior employee eventually approached Anne after an afternoon briefing at Windsor. He did not accuse Camilla directly. He explained that staff had begun receiving instructions with no written authorization and reminders that loyalty would be remembered. The wording was polite, the warning beneath it was not. Anne asked one question. Had William approved any of it? The answer was no. That was the moment her notes became an investigation. She began comparing schedules across households. She found meetings where William's representatives had been removed, then replaced by people recommended through Camilla's office. She found drafts concerning residence access that had been altered after approval. She found references to a new transition structure, a phrase broad enough to sound harmless and precise enough to conceal almost anything. Still, Anne waited. She knew that moving too early would allow every incident to be explained away separately. A misunderstanding here, an eager aide there, a scheduling problem somewhere else. Camilla would deny a pattern because no single document revealed the whole design. Anne needed the piece that connected them. It arrived 3 days before the public announcement. The matter involved a family decision linked directly to Queen Elizabeth's legacy. The decision had been settled, recorded, and understood by the senior royals expected to protect it. Yet a revised instruction appeared, shifting control away from the original arrangement and placing it under a committee influenced by Camilla's office. Anne objected immediately and firmly. Camilla dismissed the objection. She said the monarchy could not remain trapped by arrangements made for another era. She also made it clear that Anne's role did not give her authority to block the Queen's direction. The polished message revealed something devastating. Camilla no longer saw Anne as a guardian of the institution. She saw her as an obstacle. Anne read the message once, then again. She placed it beside months of records and finally saw the full shape of what had been building. The staffing changes, the private meetings, the residence lists, the ceremonial discussions, the pressure placed on officials. They were not separate incidents. They were preparation. Before midnight, Anne contacted William and requested a private meeting at Windsor. She did not explain everything over the phone. She said only that Camilla had crossed a line connected to their grandmother and that the evidence now reached further than either had feared. By 8:15 the next morning, Anne entered William's office, carrying the folder. She closed the door behind her. Then she placed the first letter in front of him. By 12:30, the conference room was completely sealed. No assistants moved in and out. No phones remained on the table. William sat beside Anne, while three officials waited across with the stillness that appears when everyone understands the stakes. Camilla arrived expecting resistance, but not preparation. She entered with two members of her household and paused when she saw the folder. It was thicker than she expected. William did not rise. Anne did not offer a greeting. One official closed the door, and the room changed at once. Anne began with the decision tied to Queen Elizabeth's legacy. She asked why Camilla's office had attempted to replace the arrangement approved by the family. The question was simple. The answer was not. Camilla said circumstances had changed. She argued that the monarchy could not remain bound by choices made under a previous reign. The institution had to move forward, and as queen, she believed she had a duty to shape that movement. Anne listened without interrupting. Then she asked who had authorized the change. Camilla's expression tightened. She replied that not every adjustment required a family vote. Some decisions, she said, belonged to those closest to the king and aware of his wishes. William looked up. That phrase mattered. Camilla had not said Charles ordered the change. She had said she understood what he wanted. Inside royal households, that difference mattered. One carried authority, the other relied on access and the expectation that nobody would challenge it. Anne asked again, had Charles personally approved the instruction? Camilla did not answer directly. Instead, she turned toward William and questioned why a settled administrative matter had become a formal confrontation. She suggested Anne was treating every update as a threat and allowing old loyalties to interfere with the present. That was the first crack. Anne placed a copy of the revised arrangement on the table. Beside it, she placed the original version. The changes were marked, names had been removed, responsibilities had shifted. A committee linked to Camilla's office had gained control over decisions once shared among senior royals. Camilla called it efficiency. Anne called it replacement. William remained quiet until Camilla dismissed Anne's objections as irrelevant to the direction of the monarchy. Then his tone changed. He told her that Anne was not irrelevant, and neither were decisions made to protect the crown beyond one household. He said no office could alter responsibilities connected to the future sovereign, and then described the result as routine. Camilla replied that William was allowing suspicion to overtake judgment. She said the changes were meant to protect Charles from pressure and prevent rival households from working against one another. The room went still again. Rival households. William repeated the phrase. He asked whether she considered his office a rival to the king. Camilla tried to soften the wording, but it was too late. The thought was already in the room. Once spoken, it could not be returned to silence. Before Anne revealed what had been uncovered, viewers who believe William and Catherine deserve a future reign free from interference should subscribe, like and share this story. Anyone happy to see William and Anne draw a line should not watch quietly and leave. Support matters most when powerful people expect the public to look away. Camilla accused Anne of collecting fragments and forcing them into a story. She said loyal staff were being treated like conspirators because they respected the Queen's office. She insisted that her position came with responsibilities, not merely ceremonial appearances. Anne opened the folder. She did not raise her voice. She removed 3 messages showing requests for William's representatives to be excluded from meetings. Then came 2 staffing recommendations, both marked urgent, both directing officials toward individuals favored by Camilla's circle. Anne placed 1 letter in front of William. Camilla recognized it. For the first time, her confidence slipped. The letter proposed moving royal operations away from William's supervision and placing them under an interim group approved through Camilla's office. It described the change as temporary, but a paragraph made the intention clear. The arrangement would remain until the Crown determined that the Prince of Wales was ready to assume control. William was the heir. The letter treated him like a problem to be managed. He read the final paragraph once, then again. Camilla began explaining that the language had been drafted by aides and never represented a final decision. William asked whether she had approved the proposal. She hesitated. That hesitation answered him. William closed the folder and requested an emergency family meeting at Windsor. Charles would attend. The legal advisors would attend. Every instruction connected to Camilla's office would be reviewed. Camilla still believed Charles would defend her. Anne knew what the next document would do to that belief. The emergency meeting began at Windsor before anyone outside understood how serious it had become. Charles arrived last. He entered without his usual procession and took the seat at the head of the table. Camilla sat to his right. William and Anne faced them. The legal advisors did not begin with opinions. They began with dates. The first marked the removal of William's representative from a residence planning session. The second showed when Camilla's office recommended a replacement. The third matched a message asking that future ceremonial discussions be routed through advisors approved by the Queen's household. One date meant little. Together, they formed a map. The correspondence showed that Camilla had been privately lobbying for authority over 4 areas that would matter later: staffing, residence management, ceremonial committees, and the flow of information reaching the Prince of Wales. Nothing was written as an attack. That was the danger. Each proposal was wrapped in language about continuity, efficiency, and protecting the king from pressure. Yet every solution moved responsibility away from William and toward people whose positions depended on Camilla's support. Charles listened in silence until one advisor reached the section concerning the transition structure. Then he interrupted. He said the phrase had been misunderstood. The palace had always reviewed future arrangements. Camilla might have shown poor judgment, but poor judgment was not the same as a deliberate attempt to weaken the heir. Anne turned 1 page. A note from Camilla's office requested that certain responsibilities remain outside William's control until he demonstrated what it called full institutional readiness. No definition of readiness appeared, no date was given, no standard was listed. The condition could have lasted indefinitely. William asked Charles whether he had approved that language. Charles said he had not seen it. Camilla moved quickly. She explained that advisors often drafted proposals before senior figures reviewed them. She said unfinished language was being presented as settled intention, but the records showed repeated approvals from her office, including comments beside the names of officials she wanted placed in key positions. This was no longer the work of an overconfident aide. The instructions had travelled upward. An official who had served through the final years of Queen Elizabeth's reign described what staff had experienced. Requests from Camilla's circle had arrived with references to the king's wishes. Employees assumed Charles had approved them. Some complied because they feared refusal would be remembered. Charles looked toward Camilla. She did not look back. That silence carried more weight than an argument. Anne finally spoke. She said Camilla had spent years being protected from consequences because Charles believed every challenge to her was rooted in the past. That protection had created a dangerous certainty. Camilla no longer believed she needed permission. She believed proximity to the king was permission. Then Anne said the words nobody in the room could soften. Camilla had mistaken Charles's protection for permanent power. Charles stiffened. William did not. For him, the issue had moved beyond marriage and family history. He was looking at a structure designed to limit what he could know, who could advise him, and when he would be considered ready to exercise authority belonging to his office. He asked the advisors a question. Could the monarchy operate with two private centers of command? The answer came without hesitation. No. A constitutional advisor explained that the Queen could support the sovereign, represent the crown, and oversee her own household. But she could not build an independent chain of authority reaching into the Prince of Wales's preparation for kingship. If staff could not tell whether instructions came from the king or from someone invoking his name, discipline would collapse. Charles tried once more to find a narrower explanation. He asked whether the documents proved intention or merely ambition. Anne responded that intention could be debated forever. Conduct could not. People had been moved. Meetings had been altered. Decisions had been redirected. William had been excluded. The plan was no longer theoretical because its first stages were operating. Then a second official spoke. He confirmed that Camilla's aides had requested access to briefing papers prepared for William. The reason given was coordination. The effect would have allowed her office to see what the heir was being told before he received it. William's expression changed. That was the line. Charles understood it too. The room no longer felt like a family dispute awaiting reconciliation. It felt like an institution discovering that someone inside it had been testing how far influence could travel before resistance appeared. The advisors placed their recommendation before Charles. Camilla leaned forward. William watched his father read. The solution was not a warning, a temporary pause, or another private promise. It called for her immediate removal from private family governance and every discussion shaping the future reign. Camilla read the recommendation once, then pushed it back across the table as though refusing to touch it could somehow weaken its force. Her voice remained controlled, but the control was thinning. She said the proposal was an insult to the king, an insult to her office, and a gift to every person who had spent years waiting to see her humiliated. No one answered immediately. Charles kept his eyes on the document. William watched him. Anne watched Camilla. The room had reached the point where silence was no longer polite. It was judgment. Camilla turned toward Charles and demanded that he stop the process. She reminded him that she had stood beside him through public criticism, family division, and years of hostility. She said William and Anne were using administrative disagreements to strip her of influence she had earned through service. Charles still did not respond. That frightened her more than anger would have. One advisor explained the restrictions in plain language. Camilla would no longer attend private meetings concerning succession planning, future household appointments, or the structure William would inherit. Her office could not issue instructions to senior staff outside its own chain of responsibility. Any request involving royal residences, family records, or ceremonial authority would require written approval. The changes went further. Several aides closely connected to Camilla would be reassigned. Access to selected briefing papers would be removed. Private residence schedules would return to the offices responsible for them. No message could carry the king's authority unless it came through the king's office. Camilla called it banishment. William called it containment. He said the monarchy could not function while one household quietly tested the limits of another. He made clear that the decision was not about punishing Charles's wife, it was about protecting the line of authority that would remain after Charles. Camilla looked at him with open disbelief. She asked whether Catherine had encouraged this. William's face hardened. He told her Catherine had nothing to do with the documents on the table, but any attempt to drag her name into the argument would only prove how quickly Camilla turned institutional questions into personal battles. Anne then requested one final condition. The restrictions had to be recorded formally. No verbal understanding, no private promise, no arrangement that could be softened once the pressure faded. Anne wanted signatures, dates, and a clear list of powers Camilla no longer held. She had spent months watching vague instructions create confusion. She would not allow vague consequences to end it. Camilla accused Anne of waiting years for revenge. Anne did not flinch. She said revenge required someone else to create the punishment. Camilla had created this one herself. That line ended the argument. Charles finally spoke. His voice was low. He said the family could not survive another public fracture, but neither could the crown survive uncertainty over who had authority to act. He asked whether a temporary suspension would satisfy the advisors. It would not. The recommendation was clear. Temporary measures would invite more pressure, more negotiation, and another quiet attempt to restore what had been removed. The decision had to stand until the next reign formally reviewed it. Camilla understood what that meant. William would control the review. For the first time, she looked less angry than abandoned. She had entered the room believing Charles would draw a line around her. Instead, he was being asked to draw a line between her and the institution. The final document was placed before him. Charles lifted the pen, then stopped. Camilla whispered his name. He signed. The sound of the pen moving across paper was almost nothing, yet everyone heard it. One short movement ended months of hidden influence. The signature Camilla believed would protect her became the signature that removed her. An aide collected the papers, another left to begin the staff changes. Within the hour, access lists were updated, briefing channels were closed, and instructions were sent to the offices affected. Camilla remained seated. For several seconds, she stared at the space where Charles's pen had rested, unable to speak at all. William rose first. He said the palace would issue a public clarification before rumors filled the silence. Camilla objected immediately. She insisted the matter belonged inside the family. Anne answered before Charles could. The family had kept it inside for too long. Anyone who truly supports William, Catherine, and Anne should subscribe, like, and share before this story is buried beneath polished appearances. Watching in silence while refusing to support the people who finally drew a line only helps Camilla's side pretend nothing happened. Camilla believed the decision would stay behind closed doors. William had already decided otherwise. By evening, he and Anne were preparing to stand together, and the palace gates were about to open. 5 minutes later, the palace doors opened, and the decision that had been sealed in private was carried into public view. William and Anne appeared together. That image alone told the story. The heir stood beside the one royal known for never wasting words, and neither looked interested in softening what had happened. There was no smile, no attempt to create the illusion of harmony, only a statement prepared with the care of people who understood that every sentence would be examined. Camilla would no longer take part in private family governance. She would not attend meetings concerning the future reign. She would not direct senior staff beyond her own household. She would not receive advance access to papers prepared for William, and she would no longer speak for the wider family unless authority had been given in writing. The language was measured. The consequence was not. Camilla had been pushed outside the circle where real decisions were made. Reporters began shouting questions before the statement was finished. Had Charles approved it? Was Camilla leaving the palace? Had William forced the king to choose between his wife and his heir? Neither William nor Anne answered. They did not need to. Charles's signature already sat on the document. Inside the palace, the reaction moved faster than the announcement. Staff who had spent months checking where instructions truly came from suddenly had one recognized chain of command. Briefing papers were rerouted, meeting lists were corrected. Offices that had grown cautious around Camilla's aides began speaking openly again. Relief did not look dramatic. It looked like people finally breathing normally. Camilla remained away from the cameras. Her chair in the private council room was empty, and the folders once delivered to her office were sent elsewhere. The silence around her was not protection anymore. It was separation. Charles stayed beside her in public, but the relationship inside the family had changed. William would still appear with his father when duty required it. Anne would still attend ceremonies. Camilla would still stand near the king. Yet every person close to the palace would know what had happened behind those appearances. Trust had broken. And once trust breaks inside a royal household, ceremony cannot repair it. Anne did not celebrate. She had never wanted another public fracture. What she wanted was a boundary strong enough to protect the decisions Queen Elizabeth had left behind, and the future William was expected to inherit. Her anger was not loud. It was finished. William understood something more difficult. He had spent years preparing for a reign that still seemed distant, but this crisis had pulled part of that responsibility into the present. He had been forced to defend the structure before it became his. That meant the transition had already begun, whether Charles wished to admit it or not. Catherine's name had never appeared in the evidence, but her place in the future made the outcome impossible to ignore. Every restriction placed around Camilla protected the household William and Catherine would one day lead. Every blocked instruction removed another obstacle from the path ahead. That was why the public response mattered. Anyone who truly supports William, Catherine, and Anne should subscribe, like, and share this video now. Watching their stand in silence while refusing to support the story only helps the palace return to polished photographs and pretend the struggle never happened. Those who believe the future crown deserves protection should prove it before this moment is buried. Camilla's downfall had not begun with one explosive argument. It began with confidence. A meeting changed here. An advisor moved there. A request passed through Charles's name without his direct approval. Each small success convinced her that resistance would never come. Then Anne kept the records. William read them. Charles signed. 3 quiet actions ended the power Camilla thought could not be touched. The greatest humiliation was not losing access to rooms or papers. It was discovering that Charles's devotion could protect her reputation, but it could not hand her control of the next reign. That belonged to William. And Anne had made certain it remained there. As evening settled over Windsor, one final question remained. Did Charles truly know nothing until the folder was opened, or had he recognized the pattern earlier and chosen silence because confronting Camilla would cost him too much? The answer may already exist. Anne appears to have preserved the original copy. Among the documents removed from Camilla's office was a handwritten note dated 6 weeks before the emergency meeting. It carried Charles's private initials, referred to William's briefing papers, and contained 5 words that could change the entire story. Those words will be revealed in the next video. And once they are read, nobody will be able to claim that the king was unaware.